Happy Monday. Happy Monday. Good morning, hockey listeners. Thank you for joining us. Another week on the Alethio Network. Appreciate you all tuning in. I'm your host, Tassos Kirkos. We have a special guest in studio today. We have my good buddy, Nathan Scheibe. Nathan, how you doing today, brother?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me in today.
Yeah. Normally with the show, we're like kind of in the here and the now. You know, I like to like run through a lot of like news, notes, topics, games of the night. We'll touch on the games later, but and I'll run through some stuff a little bit too. But I did want to like just ask you some more open-ended. There is no, for everybody out there listening, there is not many people that I know in this planet that walk around with 2 feet that know about as much hockey as Nathan here does. So I figured we could just ask some more open-ended hockey questions, have some more fun discussions. I was seeing here, I was just telling everybody that the University of Hawaii is slated to get an ACHA men's Division II team come the 26-27 season. So we love to see the growth of college hockey, whether that is club, NCAA, D1, D3. I love it. So that is very cool. Congrats to the University of Hawaii. Also, the University of Delaware, the women's team was partnering with the Philadelphia Flyers on the weekend. I saw they're going to bring a Division I women's hockey team, not next season, but I think 25-26 was the target goal for that one. So little fun stuff to open up the show. But I did want to begin with, and we were talking about this a little off air, Shane Wright gets called up. We're going to mention Akil Thomas later because I'm very excited about that. And it did not take as long as my Josh Doan prediction and calling for out into the open. I had been calling for Josh Doan to get called up for about maybe 6 weeks, 8 weeks before he finally did. And now he's been maybe the Coyotes' best player since being called up. So we look forward to a potential Akil Thomas debut tonight. However, Shane Wright gets called up. We all know the deal here with Shane Wright. If you are listening to this show, you probably know who Shane Wright is and the fact that he went 4th overall in a draft that he was expected by many to go first, and if not first, then second, and then he went all the way down to 4th and gave the Montreal Canadiens the look. And you know, we're well past that point, obviously. Like he was traded from Kingston to Windsor, and went on a little bit of a playoff run there, and then now he made the transition to pro hockey, went on a run with Coachella Valley last year in the playoffs. They went all the way to the Calder Cup final, Game 7 overtime, losing to the Hershey Bears. And now he's had a really good season with them. 43 points, 56 games in the A this year, none in 3 in the NHL. He's only played 11 NHL games total in his career. And I have to stop and wonder, what do you think about this player? Like, do you think maybe this is like a little bit late in the game? You know, should they have called him up maybe a week or two ago? Does it not really matter in the grand scheme of things? Obviously, he'll probably go back down for like a long playoff run. And I think there was a quote from Ron Francis saying that the hope for Shane was that he would be ready to step into the lineup full time come next fall. But just what are your thoughts on this player, the whole situation, the impact he can make on a Seattle roster too?
I think it's definitely an interesting case with Shane Wright just because of how his development has gone. And every team develops players differently. Like some will bring him in right away, like the Hawks did with Kirby Dach a while back, and that didn't really work out too well. But with Shane Wright, it's going to be interesting to see now, especially with the Kraken really not in playoff. Like their playoff hopes are on life support at this point. But it's going to be interesting to see where he slots into the lineup. If he's going to play top 6 minutes with like a Matty Beniers or Bjorkstrand, or whether he's going to play lower in the lineup. I think a player of his abilities is more suited for a top 6 role. He'll be able to flourish with skilled players. And like Tassos, you said, Shane Wright's he's had a very good AHL season. He's almost a point a game there. I just wonder how he's going to slot into the lineup, and especially given the remaining 10 games the Kraken have, if 10 games is enough to get an extended look at him for next year, because as you mentioned, he might be in full-time next year, which I do think...
They only have 9 games, you know? And that's saying he plays in the next game, which he probably will, but, you know...
Yeah.
I don't know that it's enough runway, you know? Like, I would have given him maybe 12, 15 games. I know, like, it's not that big of a difference, you know, 6 games here we're talking, but... anything to get yourself a bit more acclimated to, I think he slots in that 2C position. You know, you have Matty Beniers as your 1C, you have Shane Wright as your 2C. And if you're the Kraken, you can ride that for the next 10 years, right? My only thought is like, now you're going to go into next season and you're going to expect him to be able to play the 2C role, having never really put him with NHL players of that caliber. I don't know if it's like Yanni Gordon, Bjorkstrand, I know you mentioned, or, some of these other guys like Tolvanen or something, right? So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. What did you make of John Hines pulling his goalie for the second time? It worked the first time against Nashville they were playing. And Matt Boldy scores, and the Wild win in overtime. And we all found out that if the Predators had scored, then the Wild would have submitted or forfeited their loser points. Sorry, there. They did that on Saturday. The Jonathan Marchessault got the empty netter, and the Wild forfeited their loser point. And just what do you think of that move in general? There were some calls for it maybe happening in regulation. If you're really going to do something like that, like why not pull your goalie like tied? It was 1-1, right? So why not pull your goalie in regulation and try and get the point in regulation? And if you're going to end up with none, then you're going to end up with none. And if you win and you score, then you prevent the Golden Knights from picking up their own loser point. What do you just make of all that?
Well, one, I think that was a very bold move, to say the least. Obviously, it worked the first time, and with the second time, they kind of had to do it, especially given that where they are in the playoff race, and they needed every point they can get, especially against, I believe it was Vegas. They did it against the second time, and they didn't succeed. But I think the reason why they might have pulled their goalie in overtime as opposed to 5-on-5 is because they might have seen that a 3-on-3 would be a better matchup when they had their goalie pulled. They might have felt that their 3 players would have been better than the opposing 3 players as opposed to 5, because there's more factors with 5.
Do you think that 4-on-3 is a better advantage than 6-on-5?
Yes, just because again, like there's more ice. You can get your top 4 skilled players as opposed to your top 6 skilled players. And I feel like you can work the puck around a lot more. I feel like the success of a 4-on-3 power play is a lot better than a 6-on-5, just because there's a lot less room with the 6-on-5, and you can work the puck, and you can really concentrate with your 4 best. You don't have to necessarily put out like a bumper roll or something. You can really focus in on your 4.
I feel like you're right. The idea of space and, being able to set up, you can set up a 4-on-3 a little bit easier in terms of a power play scheme than you can a 6-on-5. But I feel like maybe we've seen a lot more 6-on-5 goals, and this may be a trend that I need to do. Excuse me, everybody. I need to do a bit more digging into as far as, I feel like 6-on-5 goals have been going up over the last couple of years. And now you see a lot of games today that end up getting tied late in regulation. Like that's this is the age of comebacks. No lead is safe. It used to be 2-0 was like the death knell lead in hockey. Then it was 3-0, and now it's even you see teams come back from down 4 in games. And whereas like even 10 years ago, you might have shut the TV off if a team was up 4, right? I don't know. Just an interesting thing. I like the move a lot. I don't know if it's going to become more, more standard. Like, I don't know if more coaches are going to try this kind of thing. I mean, the Wild genuinely need the points. Like, that was, like, probably their season there. Like, if they had scored and, maybe you give yourself a little hope. I've said for about a week here now that I think the Western playoff race, I think both playoff races are kind of over and done with. I know we've seen some, like, flip-flopping in the East with Washington and Philadelphia, but it seems like everything's just like kind of wrapped up now. It's not, St. Louis isn't making a run. Like the Wild aren't making a run. I don't know. What do you think? Any last thoughts on it? Like, do you think maybe more coaches try this? Maybe like in regulation one day instead. I don't know.
I mean, I think they do, just because with the playoff races as they are. I mean, in the West, you probably won't see any of this anymore, just because most of the teams that are out by 6 or plus. Which, I mean, still doable, but you're going to need a lot of help from outside teams. But as far as the Eastern Conference is concerned, there is a little more leeway to it. I especially think getting down to the last few games of the season, like maybe like if teams have like 3, 2, or 1 games left and it's really coming down to it and they need that extra point and you really have no choice. So I think if the rule is there that you can do it, more coaches will employ that strategy, just because if you need that extra point, you just don't have a choice. And growing up playing hockey, my team has done this. We've seen teams against us do it, especially on like tournaments when goal differential is the tiebreaker, and there's only 4 teams, 2 round robin games. We used to see this every weekend. Coaches would pull their goalies just to get that extra goal, even if they were up by 5, because if they had given that extra cushion, that would put them in a better spot moving forward. That could be the difference between a gold medal and not placing a medal at all. So I do feel like we would see this more in the NHL as we go down the stretch in subsequent playoff races. Maybe not this year, because most of the teams that are trying to make it don't really seem like they want it, or they're just not winning enough games. But I do feel like as we get closer to the end of the regular season, we might see this more.
Do you think Patrick Waugh would try it? I mean, obviously, so tonight, 8 games on tap. The Islanders are in Philadelphia to take on the Flyers, the team they are chasing. Do you think maybe if it's tied late, maybe Patrick Waugh, this is a guy who's notoriously known for pulling his goalie with like 6-7 minutes left on the clock, if his team is down by enough goals. Do you think maybe even Derek Lalonde in Tampa Bay, maybe if they are tied late, like those are 2 teams that need the points. If we're talking about a playoff race happening in the East, it's the Islanders and it's the Red Wings that are going to make things interesting here. And they both have the power to do so. I know you said that it seems like some of these teams don't want it, and sometimes it does feel that way. But now's the time. Like you have 9 games left, and what better way to sort of jolt the bench than be like, hey, we're going for it right now. Like you have to score, otherwise they have an empty net, and we're gonna lose this game, not get any points out of it. And you guys just battled for 55 minutes to keep it a tie game, But that 1 point doesn't really matter. Do you think we see that tonight at all?
In the case of the Islanders and the Flyers game, I think we wouldn't, just because the Islanders, they are chasing the Flyers, yes, but they're in different divisions. Like if the Islanders were against the Capitals, absolutely. If Patrick Waugh was down, if the Islanders were down, Patrick Waugh would absolutely, I think, would pull the goalie in an overtime situation if we got to that point. But because they're against the Flyers and they're not directly chasing them, I mean, they are going to chase them for that final wild card spot, especially as the Flyers they're not winning enough games to maintain. I think they lost that spot already, and they're in the wild card. But push come to shove, the Islanders really think they need that point. Then I don't think they would not consider it. And as far as Detroit and Tampa Bay goes, especially because they are in the same division, I know the point differential is quite enormous between these two. Tampa Bay's been hot lately, and they're running down the Leafs right now, actually. But as far as the Atlantic race goes, I think Detroit might have to do something like this, especially considering the amount of top-end talent. Like you put out, let's just say, Kane, DeBrincat, and Gostisbehere, or Kane, DeBrincat, and Seider for a little more defensive-oriented. You really have a strong case, and you put that 4th guy out there with Seider or Gostisbehere. You can do a lot of different damages for Detroit, but you got to consider who's in the ice for Tampa Bay. It just depends on the situation, I think.
Tampa Bay is scoring on that, definitely. That's a tricky one, but, all right. Well, enough of goalie pull talk. We will see if we get it in the future, either in the games tonight or the games the rest of the season. But if not, I definitely think it could be something that, we see more of in future seasons, at least. It takes a while for some of these things. They make their way over from Europe, and then, they're slowly implemented and, brought over and tried here and there, and then they work a couple times. Obviously, John Hines is 1 for 1 on the pulling the goalie for the extra skater. But, we'll see how this expands more. So, okay, you mentioned the Leafs, and I guess we should just get it out of the way. Is anything different for the Toronto Maple Leafs this year? Obviously, it seems to be a bit different. They seem to be embracing this underdog status. You have some of these top teams in the Eastern Conference, the Florida Panthers, the Boston Bruins, we all know their Stanley Cup credentials. Same for the New York Rangers, and even the Carolina Hurricanes are, in my mind, probably even more of a contender than the New York Rangers. But there is something to be said about maintaining that underdog status. If you look at the Leafs over the last 5-6 years, in a lot of these playoff matchups, I know maybe some of the ones with Tampa Bay, but they've gone in expected to win. And when it hasn't gone their way, they, obviously the city implodes, and you can tell it weighs on the players even a lot. Like the burden of expectation bears no greater cross than the players of Toronto. So I just, I wonder if you think anything is different. Obviously, you've got like guys that are a bit more rugged. Joel Edmondson, Simone Benoit, Bobby McMahon has come up and been one of the more electrifyingly streaky players, I guess, if you want to find an interesting way to put it, in the NHL since his real stretch run of games here. We all remember that hat trick in St. Louis about a month ago now. Is there any way that things are different for this team and what you feel for their chances going into the playoffs?
I think it remains to be seen. I feel like we go through this every year. They add player X, player Y, player Z, and we say, oh, it's going to make them more rugged and more durable, but then it ends up just flaming out. But I do think Bobby McMahon could be an X factor. He could be one of those playoff type
He's
players.
incredible, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. But he's got that playoff archetype. He hits, he can score goals. Basically, he'll score goals in bunches as he's shown this year with his first career hat trick. He could be definitely one of the X factors, but they do have a lot more ruggedness and like depth scoring. They have Bertuzzi, they have Domi, both of which have stepped up their game, especially in the second half of the season. We'll see how Matthew Nyes does in the playoffs as well. He's kind of struggled this season to put up points necessarily compared to where he was last year. But I do think that the team, it remains to be seen how they play. As currently stands, they would be playing the Panthers, which they have experience doing, as we all know. And if the Panthers end up flip-flopping with the Bruins, because there's only 2 points separating them currently, the Leafs know well the Bruins. And I'm not sure which would be a better matchup. Maybe the Bruins, because the Leafs know their systems and their two styles contrast very differently. Like the Leafs are a very wide open kind of style, and the Bruins, basically, if you don't score first, and if the Bruins score first, they're gonna drag you into the mud and turn the game very slow. And I don't think that favors the Leafs. But if the Leafs play the Panthers, we could see very high scoring games because we got two very powerful offenses, two very highly, like two of the top three goal scorers in the league, with Matthews hitting 60 the other day and Reinhardt at 52. We could see an explosion of offense if it's those two teams. So I think it just remains to be seen if the Leafs can overcome that hurdle. And if they play the Panthers again, who knows? Maybe they'll overcome their demons. They did it against the Lightning last year. Maybe they'll do it for the other Florida team this year.
Do you think it's more mental with that organization, with a lot of these guys? Like, even, before the Matthews era, there was the collapse against the Boston Bruins in 2013, and that was an entirely different roster. Obviously, I know Morgan Riley was a young player on that team, but other than that, it's an entirely different squad. Is the mental side of things just, are we maybe giving too much credit to it or not enough credit to it in that, like, these are real expectations that everybody has, and it is an actual burden on the guys on the ice? Like, you can see late in games, like if they had a 3-goal lead, they played Edmonton a few weeks ago, they were up 5-0 after 2. Edmonton scores 3 power play goals in the third to make it 5-3. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins hits one off the post, this close to making it 5-4. And you could just see, like, they tighten up a bit. Like they're, they pucker up, they clench. And, I don't see a lot of other teams in the National Hockey League do that. They're just kind of playing the game. But with these guys, you can tell it's a bit more mental than anything else. Is that a real thing for you, or maybe not?
It absolutely is a thing. I do believe, I was watching that Edmonton Leafs game. It was 5-0, and I turned it off and went to a different game. I think there was a lot of games on that night. I come back, I'm like, it's 5-2 Edmonton. I'm like, oh boy, could we be seeing this again? And I think just having that thought alone just makes you. I mean, the players know. They're human too. They know that if they blow the lead, it's going to be the city's going to be on fire. It's going to be the internet's going to be all over them. They're going to say this team's a fraud. This team's this team is that. I definitely think it's more mental than anything at this point. They have a great roster. There's no denying that. They have the skill. They have those aforementioned the core 4 players who can do it all. I mean, they have 2 number 1 centers, although Tavares hasn't had the same numbers, but he's still one of the best two-way centers. Just because his offense isn't there doesn't mean his defense is there. But I definitely think it's all between the ears, because if as soon as one goal happens at their home, they're like, okay, here we go again, I guess.
Yeah.
But I definitely think it's a prevalent issue with this team. And it has been probably since, I want to say, 2018-19 with those Bruins series after those collapses.
One last question about the Leafs, and then we'll move on to some other fun topics. But Austin Matthews scores 60 on Saturday night in Buffalo. Looked like a Leafs home game. You could hear that pop in the crowd. That was pretty cool for them. I'm sure the Buffalo Sabres players did not take too much of a liking to the fact that the Leafs fans invaded their building, and the Buffalo Sabres fans were able to sell their season tickets to Leafs fans and probably make close to the cost of the season tickets back in just selling them for one game. But just thoughts on him. Obviously, we're watching a goal chase with Alexander Ovechkin. He's chasing Gretzky, but Austin Matthews is only the 9th player in NHL history, I think, to hit 60 multiple times. One, do you think there's any chance he gets to 70? I think the answer is no. I think it stood as a chance for yes for a while there, but I think we're kind of past that point a little bit with 60 or with 70. I don't know that even that's a target for him. How high do you think he could finish this year? And, maybe a larger conversation. Are we, witnessing the next guy to give us a goal scoring chase?
Yeah, as far as Matthews goes, I think he could be like in 10 years, we could see him chasing Ovechkin for that if he does set the record, because he's actually scored more goals at this point in his career. I believe it's 550 games. He scored more goals than Ovechkin has at this point. And we know Ovechkin lost the season of 04-05 because of the lockout, so that didn't help, obviously. But I don't think Matthews will hit 70 unless he goes on an insane run. The Leafs still have 9 games left.
He would need a hat trick in there.
Yeah, he would need at least a hat trick. I mean, he had 2 hat tricks to start the season back to back, so it's not out of the realm of possibility. But I don't think that he'll go out of his way to try to get 70 just because it takes a lot of effort to score goals in the National Hockey League. And I feel like if he tries to hit that, it might burn him out a little bit and maybe tire him out. Not saying he's not obviously one of the best conditioned athletes in the world, but trying to put all that strain on you before playoffs, I don't think would be relatively smart, especially if the Leafs can clinch, which could be tonight. But you never know because Tampa's still running them down, so they might want to play their starters right up until that last game to get the best matchup they think for themselves. So there is still a chance. I just don't think it would be smart to chase it. And if the opportunity is there, of course, take it. But I think, who knows? We talked about the mental side. It might be a good distraction for the team just to focus on Matthews trying to hit 70 as opposed to, okay, here we go, another playoff run. Are you playing the Panthers? Are you playing the Bruins? And they keep going back and forth. That might actually be a good distraction for the team to have some individual success before going into the playoffs. And then trying to get Matthews to 70, you might try harder to score those goals, especially down the stretch once you clinch. Because we all talk about how teams that are just squeaking into the playoffs have been playing playoff hockey for a month or two. If the Leafs are playing that hard to get Matthews to 70, that might actually help them in the playoffs because they're going to be playing hard already. And obviously, regular playoff goals don't count towards a regular season. So having that chase all the way up until game 82 potentially, that might give them momentum going into the playoffs. So that might actually be a good thing for the Leafs to help Matthews get to 70. But as far to answer your other question, I think if the Leafs would go to more of a safe route and if Matthews continues his current pace, I think 65 is definitely feasible. Mm-hmm. I would say max 68, but either way, anything above 65 is, as far as my lifetime goes, that's the highest I've seen. So I would like to see that get surpassed.
No, I would too. I thought the chase for 70 would have been very cool. Obviously, to score 70 goals in an 82-game season is bonkers. So it would have been cool to see. I will zig or zag a little bit here on the idea that it might give, I think a lot of Toronto media and Toronto fans would disagree that the chase for 70 would be a welcome distraction for the team. The Leafs' final 2 games are against Florida and Tampa Bay in no particular order. So, maybe you look to rest some of those guys instead of, if he was sitting at 68 in their last game of the season's against the Florida Panthers, that's a tough team, first of all, that is not going to give you an inch, even if it's the last game of the season before you go and play them for another 7 games. I don't know. I would rather almost sit a player like Austin Matthews for that game and get him more prepared for. But if he's at 68, you can't sit him. You know what I mean? You can't not play him. You got to put him out there in the hopes that maybe he scores 2 goals. But all right, so we'll cut the Leafs talk there. I should mention, because we were talking about the Wild earlier, Ryan Hartman will have a hearing with the NHL Department of Player Safety today facing discipline for an unsportsmanlike conduct. That happened at the end of their 2-1 loss to the Golden Knights on Saturday that we talked about. So, Austin Matthews, by the way, he has in 553 games, we're only 3 games off, by the way, bud, and 359 goals. So that is a lot of goals in not a lot of time. So it should be interesting the rest of the way. So I brought this up because I was interested about this article. I was surprised almost that the NHL had put up this article on their website. And the headline on the website is NHL Green. That's a series that they do. And it says how changing climates impact outdoor hockey. And then you click on it, and the title is Adaptive Strategies Raising Awareness of Climate Change, NHL Green Advocacy. Basically just looking at, with climate change and with the continuation of CO2 emissions into the atmosphere, obviously things are going to warm up. You can already see that in a lot of different places along where we are, a little bit north of us, a little bit south of us. The idea of having long winters to go outside and skate have kind of passed by. I know people personally. I follow people on social media that they've tried to put up outdoor rinks this winter, and they maybe got to use it for 3 days. And there was some cause for concern, I guess. A lot of disappointment, I would say, amongst a lot of hockey fans and hockey enjoyers who just wanted to go out for a rip outside, and spent a lot of dads who spent a lot of time building outdoor rinks for themselves and their kids and the neighborhood kids and all sorts of things. Now, I'm going to ask you a very open-ended question here. Do you believe in climate change? No, I'm just kidding. Do you think that there comes a point, and we can open this up to even as much as you want, because look, like I'm working with a group trying to help the advancement of hockey in Greece, which is a warm weather, Mediterranean, temperate kind of climate. There is no ice over there. There is one sheet of ice that is about the third of the size of a regulation ice rink that you would see at McFetridge right around the corner here in Chicago. Do you think that we will ever see a National Hockey League game played on synthetic ice?
That's a good question. I think the technology might have to be a little bit better, I guess, for the synthetic ice. Now, the one caveat to that question is I have never skated on synthetic ice, so I can't really give an opinion on the state of it. But I think that would be a question for if we were to propose a game like that. Obviously, you could play with synthetic ice anywhere, and I feel that would be a great initiative to grow the game, and you can do that literally anywhere.
Yeah, I think of places like the Caribbean and Latin America and South America and all that fun stuff. I didn't mean to cut you off there, but
that's okay.
So what do you like the idea though? Do you think? I mean, obviously you're right that the development of the technology would need to be a lot farther than it is now. You think about just the way human innovation has gone in general, even the last 10 years with, point to any development, discovery, creation, invention, things like AI, right? Like that has gotten to a certain point over the last 10 years and 5 years and year where, the more you push things out, some of it via necessity, I don't know that with, the furthering of climate change, and we're talking like, 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line, 40, 50, before it really becomes prevalent in our everyday lives and how we evaluate things. But just the idea that like the hotter it is outside, the more it costs to keep rinks cold inside. The more refrigeration costs you have, the higher ice time costs become. So the accessibility to ice does not become as mainstream even as it is now. And you can argue that hockey's not really an accessible game to begin with, right? Equipment's expensive, ice time's expensive. They're not really out there pushing ball hockey in, the streets or anything like that. Like there's more basketball courts and free to play football programs than hockey, right? But just a thought, I do think that like the advancement of it will come at a much more rapid rate. Like I think synthetic ice, I've skated on it once. I feared for the safety of my blades, just didn't want to ruin my blades. from everything I've been told, it doesn't really do anything to the blades. It's safe to skate on. Your skates won't get torched. I still hold my reservations a bit about it. But, give it 5 years, give it 10 years. I think the world of synthetic ice is going to exist in a completely different realm than it does right now.
I agree. I think while we were talking, I did have an idea. Maybe the NHL wouldn't go to this just right away because it's technology and how they already have so many different outdoor games and their schedule is packed and they're going to have the Four Nations Cup coming up. I really would think the PWHL could do something like this. Go
Ooh,
to
good call.
because they're the way they've approached the league this year. They've been playing in neutral site games all the time. They're setting records all the time. Why not go to a country to grow the game where women's hockey is more prevalent, like in the international scope? If you look at the top 10 women's hockey rankings, you have Japan and Hungary in there. As far as the men's side, there is no
Japan or Hungary.
Yeah, I know those teams or those countries aren't exactly warmer climates, but you could still set up a synthetic ice, not only to just give it a test run in the PWHL, you could also go to a more picturesque location where ice might not be logical to set up. Like you can do it on a beach. I mean, you could have the coolest backdrops. I mean, look at the Lake Tahoe games the NHL did during the COVID season. I mean, obviously we had ice and the climate was right, but look at the backdrop of the mountains. I mean, that was awesome with the lake as well. I think by doing that, like, the PWHL could, they could set attendance records that could be one of their first outdoor games. They have yet to play an outdoor game in a big stadium, but I think doing it in a different country, especially one that is more prevalent on the women's side of the game than the men's, like aforementioned Hungary or Japan, I think that would be a great opportunity, especially for the PWHL if they're the first to jump on that. But to go back to the technology, I do think it is advancing rapidly. I just hope we don't see the de-evolution of ice with the evolution of synthetic, like with the cost rising ever so with the ice because of climate change. Like this winter, I feel like it snowed like maybe once, and it's just been kind of mild, mid-30s around the Chicagoland area. But I just hope ice never goes away because hockey's been played on ice since the 1870s. So
Yeah.
I feel like as long as maybe refrigeration techniques will get better because technology. We hear this phrase all the time: "A rising tide floats all boats." Excuse me, but maybe the refrigeration techniques will get better, less expensive. Maybe they can use solar power to power it, but I'm no technical expert. But I hope the technology does advance to where we could have those amazing opportunities with the synthetic ice and with keeping NHL ice on the ice.
Solar power to power hockey rinks. I love it. I think that's a great idea. I think that would be really cool. And you mentioned the PWHL trying it. I think that's a really innovative way. Even a league like the Coast, I know that would be a high cost operation for them to pull off. I think the East Coast, they do outdoor games in the East Coast. Like they'll do one or two. I know the American Hockey League does like one or two a year maybe. But I like it. I didn't mean to, take that on such a slant, but I think it's interesting. I think it could, lend to the growth of hockey even more, ironically enough, the need for synthetic ice, furthering it in maybe places like Africa, South America, even Asia, right? So I think that would be cool. Do you have any thoughts on the PWHL? First of all, like what we mentioned it, maybe just a quick thought or two on the league. I know you've had a bit of a vested interest in women's hockey. I know, we're all pressed for time. So Nathan is a very hard worker, everybody. So don't fault him if he doesn't have too much time to catch all the PWHL action. But maybe just like thoughts on the league as a whole, the operations of it, there's been some backlash. I think a lot of people that hate on it actually haven't even watched a period of the hockey. So, they don't really know what they're talking about. But just, overall thoughts on the league, maybe players, teams, specific things that you've enjoyed, trends, whatever.
Yeah, I've enjoyed seeing the growth of the league, especially this year. Once it was announced back in, I believe, August of 23, it's been great to see the growth of it. And I'll be honest, I haven't watched enough of it because of time constraints with school. By the time I'm done, it's kind of hard to get invested into all the new teams and the players. And I usually stick to NHL hockey just because it's what I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
But as far as the PWHL is concerned, I have watched as many games as possible. And what's good about this league is, I mean, currently there's 6 teams, but we're already talking about expansion because I feel like there's so many different markets you could tap into that are not the NHL doesn't have yet. And there's so many more quote unquote traditional hockey markets, and you get the non-traditionals as well. I feel like there's room for expansion for this league. I mean, there's so much potential because you finally have the conglomeration of all the best players in the world, not just 2 different leagues or 3 different leagues. Everyone's playing together. They're playing the best talent. You have people coming over from overseas. You have the college players getting drafted. I mean, there's an actual draft now. I mean, everything is in place for this league to become the greatest, the greatest women's hockey league ever, and one of the top professional leagues ever. And now that the PWHL has been able to give these women livable salaries, they can just focus their entire existence on what they love doing, and that is hockey. They don't have to worry about getting a second job. I remember reading an article on one of the various research papers I've done on women's hockey where one player had to work a construction job aside with her hockey career. And I remember coming out of high school, I worked construction, and by the time I had to go play hockey, I was exhausted. I couldn't even move, and this was a summer league game. And I don't know how these people did this during playing pro hockey. I mean, the amount of time they spend working is incredible. I mean, upwards of 80 hours a week. And now they can just focus on their entire existence in hockey, and they don't have to worry about finding a second career growing up or going to college as a normal student trying to find a degree if they weren't going to play hockey at all. What this league is doing is providing a real career path for these women. And it's been great to see. And the founding players that have just established the league, like your Kendall Coyne Schofields, your Sarah Nurses, et cetera, they've really driven this league. And they are the ones, the players themselves are making this league great. And we've seen the attendance records for women's games all time it seems like being smashed every week. You had the game at the XL Energy Center. There's the game at the Bell Center in Montreal, which is the highest seated venue in the NHL. I mean, these neutral site games have been incredible, and that's why I mentioned with the synthetic ice with the PWHL, because they're all about growing the game. I mean, going out to different countries with a quick setup routine with the synthetic ice would be a great opportunity for them. But there's just so much potential for this league, and I love how they have the new rules, the 3-2-1 point system, how their draft lottery position is decided. I think the NHL would definitely go along with something like that. But the only knock I think everyone has that outside of the product, because obviously there'll be detractors for the product itself on the ice because, like you said, they probably haven't watched a single period of the game because the games have been great. I mean, they're
fantastic.
They've been physical. I mean, it's a war out there. It's great to watch. The only knock I had, especially doing research in school, I've done various research papers. Everything I do is about hockey, so I figured this would be a good angle to talk about. But the branding of their teams, hopefully we get actual team names because.
Do you really think that that's as big of a deal as people are making it out to be? Because I don't seem to, but I do want to hear your point if you believe that is like a genuine thing that they swung and missed on, or an opportunity, I guess, that they missed out on.
Yeah, I think it is quite a big opportunity that they did miss because I'm currently in one of my sport classes for school. We talk about how brand loyalty can be established right away from the outset of the team being introduced, and having that team name can really endear fans to the team, especially if it has some significance to their city or has some sort of tie to the local subculture to a team. Like for example, the Nashville Predators. For those who don't know, the Predators' name was chosen because when they were building the rink, they found I think they found remains of like an ancient being, like a skeleton of some saber-toothed tiger, I think.
Yeah.
And that's how the Predators team name came to be, and that's exclusive to the Nashville area, obviously. So I think by missing the opportunity to develop the team names right from the outset, it might have. I mean, obviously it hasn't detracted fans from coming in. I mean, the Toronto team has sold out their entire season before the season began. But I think there might be more brand loyalty once the teams have actual names. And that might have been a product of because the league was set up so quickly, which was a good thing, obviously. And it would be better I think it would be better to have a more thought out team name than just rush something in and kind of be surface level. But I think maybe just better branding from the outset might have been a better idea, but it's worked so far, so I can't complain there.
I agree with you. I think that a lot of people, like I said, a lot of people that are saying, oh, they don't have team names, like, those are the people that we were saying that they haven't really watched it. They don't understand the product. They don't understand why they don't have team names. They just look at it as an easy thing to point at and, make fun of essentially. But I think, they had a choice to make. Do you play this season or do you wait until next season and have all of this stuff figured out? And I think the players were really hell bent on playing this season, like getting games in and establishing that part of it. And here's the thing: what you said about Nashville, that can still ring true. Where now you're going to have that established connection with the organization and the city, that'll kind of exist, and then almost a team name will breed itself from there, hopefully. Because I feel like if they had rushed it, you probably get one or two names that you were like, oh boy, like that's not a good name or a good fit or a good design or whatever.
Yeah, like when you're playing NHL franchise mode, and you come up with a team in 5 minutes just to get on the ice. It might be something like that. But one aspect I do think that is an advantage from this is that the players themselves might have been able to build their brand more because there are no team branding names. Like you'll see social media posts of player X or player Y. And I think because there's no team name, I mean, you have the Ottawa logo for the word marks of the teams. Like I was using Ottawa for an example, but I feel like the players are able to market themselves better because they're not directly tied to a team name. I mean, they'll have the city name on them, but I feel it might provide more loyalty once the merchandise comes out, and the fans might, especially those just getting into the game, they're not gonna have to focus on team names, team logos, all that, plus the players. They can focus on just the players and the city they're attached to. And then once the branding gets properly in place, hopefully this offseason, then they'll be like, okay, I know my favorite player plays for the Ottawa blank or the Montreal blank. It's going to be, I think it might have been an advantage for that, actually, looking back at it now.
Okay, so we'll put a pause on the PWHL for there. I know you said that you did not catch any of the NCAA tournament hockey games this weekend, but I did want to bring them up just because this is a hockey show, and I previewed them and I did watch them, and in my opinion, and in my truth telling, I watched a bit more NCAA hockey than I did NHL hockey this weekend. It just the one and done nature. Hockey is a best of 7 game, and I love that. I love it in the CHL, and I love it in the NHL. I love it in the AHL. Like I just hockey is meant to be a best of 7 series game. Understood. That being said, one and dones in the NCAA tournament are electric. They are, when you are down a goal and you have your goalie pulled and your season is on the line, it's every game is a game 7, right? It's what we all want all the time. And so the games are awesome. I really enjoyed watching them. So we have our Frozen Four punched. That will be Boston College, Michigan, Boston University, and Denver. Michigan making it for the 3rd straight year. They upset a Michigan State team I was very high on. Obviously, they had Isaac Howard, potential top 2 draft pick, Artem Levshinov. I have him going 2 after Macklin Celebrini. I don't know that a lot of people do. But they beat Michigan State in the final quarterfinal, 5-2. That one, was close for a little bit there. And then, Michigan had a couple, it was like 2 goals in 12 seconds. Did you see the pass from Frank Nazar through the legs?
Unfortunately, I did not.
Oh man, I'm gonna show you this right now while I'm talking about it. But a really good Michigan team. I know Michigan State was billed as a very, very high, just a very high seed, and they were the 1 seed in their bracket. And this Michigan team is still very deep. Yeah, isn't that gross? Like that is.
It's a nice pass. And Blackhawks fans, be excited for Frank Nazar because he's going to be
over to Gavin Brindley too, who's an insane player. Blue Jackets got a steal there. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off about Nazar. Nazar is excellent too. Just there were a couple times that he put some moves on some guys, and like this guy's got the bag. He's got the tools in the tool chest to be able to do it. But Rucker McGroarty's a really good player too. Seamus Casey did not play in that game yesterday, but he's still a very good player. Marshall Warren is a defenseman. He was a transfer over from BC, and he wears an A at Michigan, his first season there, and just really impactful yesterday. So Michigan takes one of the spots. Boston College beat reigning champs Quinnipiac in overtime. That was awesome. Really back and forth game. It was 5-4 in overtime. Jack Edward, I think was his name was Jackson Edward. I don't know what his name was. I don't know the player very well, but Potts the overtime winner. Just a really back and forth game. You could tell the Vinny Duplessis was the goalie for Quinnipiac, and normally when a goalie gives up 5 goals, you're hard pressed to say he had a great game, but he had a phenomenal. Like there were maybe 5 or 6 like 10 bell saves that this guy made. That Boston College is loaded. You could tell it wore on some of the Quinnipiac guys a bit, but they're an older team, a bit more of an experienced team. They won it last year, obviously on the backs of like an older roster, because that's the thing about college hockey is you can have a 17-year-old Macklin Celebrini, or you can have a 24, 25-year-old, 5th year grad transfer that, has been in college hockey for the last 4 seasons before this one, right? So, Boston College takes the other one, and then Denver beat Cornell 2-1 in the other quarterfinal. Denver's good. I did not expect them to have the run that they've had this year, but especially in this tournament, I thought they were in kind of a tougher bracket. They seem to have one of the easier paths. I know Cornell was a good squad and provided an upset against Maine in the first round, but even so, I thought Maine was going to be the team to get out of there. I thought that was kind of how they build this a little bit, as like the 3 teams and then Maine, not really Denver, but Denver moves on. They're a good hockey team, and then BU overwhelms Minnesota 6-3. I don't know who is going to end up winning it, but I do know that whoever ends up beating that BU Terriers team is a very good hockey team because Macklin Celebrini, obviously, Lane Hudson. Some of these other players on this squad are just, unreal hockey players. So that is your men's college Frozen 4. I don't know if there's any points I'm missing about this. And so I know we did our ACHA talk at the beginning of this show, but this came across as soon as I opened up my phone to show Nathan the Frank Nazar goal. And that is, get this, guys, we were talking about outdoor games and warm weather climates, and then this pops up right as soon as I open up my telephone. Florida State University and the University of Florida agreed to a 2025 January outdoor rivalry game at Doak Campbell Stadium, which is where the FSU football team plays their games. So those are 2 club hockey teams. Obviously, they're not NCAA Division I or 3, but that's freaking awesome. As somebody that grew up in South Florida too, never really like. In my mind, I know Tampa Bay did play an outdoor game against Nashville, right? In Nashville, but I've been clamoring for a Panthers Lightning outdoor game somewhere in South Florida. I know that maybe not even. It doesn't even need to be in South Florida. Maybe I'm being a little bit too picky, because I want to say, put it in the Dolphin, put it at Hard Rock, put it at nobody really cares about the Miami Marlins or the construction. I was at a Marlins game last summer, and the arena, the stadium doesn't really lend itself toward like the Wrigley type Winter Classic that we're going to get this upcoming New Year's. But I love it. I think that's really cool. It was right up the alley of what we were talking about too, with the with the synthetic ice and the expanding hockey. But I'm in for a Florida Tampa Bay outdoor game stadium series, whatever you want to call it. Make it happen. Even if if you're really wanting to do it in Tampa Bay, put it in the Rays Stadium. That would probably be where you want to do something like that. But I just thought I'd throw that out there. Florida State University and University of Florida will be playing next January as well. I might even really try and go to that because that sounds just like a can't miss event. They did when Carolina hosted the stadium series at NC State. They did like an NC State, I think UNC game outside for club hockey, and it just like the atmosphere of it just looked incredible. Like it looked really cool. Also, shout out NC State's men's and women's college basketball teams both making it to the Final Four. Very cool. I am currently losing our bracket challenge to Ravens somehow. Neither here nor there. But back to the hockey. Well, I guess we could pause here on outdoor games. I don't know if I've asked you this in your call-ins. I do have a question here that I asked you that you cleverly evaded last time that I'm going to get an answer from you. But just, I don't know if I asked you this before, but just thoughts on the Winter Classic here, Wrigley?
I obviously I'm excited for it being someone from the suburbs of Chicago, seeing the Blues, the Hawks again. In the Winter Classic, yes, I would love to see a Battle of Florida or two different teams that haven't been in the Winter Classic, but the opportunity to see
It's good for hockey.
two historic rivals in the Blackhawks and the Blues, especially now with both the Blues and the Blackhawks have upcoming younger players. Obviously, I mean, you got the Thomases, the Kyrous, and the Bedards, and they're going to have a bunch of new players coming in. It's going to be a good rivalry game. And for those remembering, the Blackhawks lost to the Blues in the last Winter Classic that were faced. So maybe the Hawks can get a little bit of revenge on that. I remember the first Winter Classic at Wrigley Field. I was only in second grade, so I don't remember much of it.
Did you go to it?
I did not know.
Oh,
okay. I was only 8 years old. My parents didn't really want to take us. I'm the oldest of two younger siblings, and they were, I think, 5 and 1 at that point. My parents were like, yeah, no, that's not gonna happen. So, but we watched it on TV. It was a great game, and Wrigley is such a great atmosphere to host a hockey game. So
That was 2008, wasn't it? Yeah.
yeah, it was a long time ago. That was the second one. Or no, I think it was 2009.
You might be
One
right.
of those two.
Right.
Either way, it was still a long time ago, but it would be nice to see how the theme might be different, or how the venue might have changed, and how it's going to be differentiated from last time. And of course, as being a Jersey fan, I'm looking forward to see those new uniforms, especially with the advent of Fanatics coming in next year. It will be interesting to see what happens there.
Okay, so you just opened up a can of worms that I don't feel like we can skip over.
I will go into this.
Be honest with me, because my answer is I think it's going to be terrible. I think it's genuinely going to be awful. Thoughts on Fanatics next season? Like, how worried are you on a scale of 10 to 40? Because 1 to 10 is already out of the question. We're already at max worrying here. But
yeah, I'm pretty much at 40. Because I've gotten Fanatics clothing in the past. Like I like to get those t-shirt jerseys, the jerseys.
Yeah.
And I can't wear them because they fall apart after like 3 washes.
Jesus.
So I usually get one for Christmas every year for my parents. And this year I got a Moritz Sider shirt. And
That's so cool.
Between Christmas and now, I've worn it once because I'm just afraid of getting it ruined in the wash.
Yeah.
And I love to look at, like, I have an old Mark Giordano shirt, and it's
Flames?
Yeah, I have I have them from every team because he's my favorite player. So that's why I kind of want the Leafs to win the cup this year. But especially he might retire after this year. But anyway, I digress. But that Fanatics Giordano shirt is just torn to pieces, and I can't even wear it. The neckline is too stretched. So I'm seeing what happens in baseball with the players complaining about it as well. And I don't know. I want to be optimistic. I mean, they are taking over the factory that Adidas is leaving in Quebec. So it just remains to be seen. But the optimist in me wants to believe in them, but I don't know. We'll have to see.
Nathan is a much larger optimist than I am. I just think it's going to be very bad. Especially maybe not the quality of I don't know that the quality of the jerseys on ice is going to drop substantially compared to where it is, just because that is the thing that everybody is going to have their eyes on. Yes, if you receive a jersey that, Moritz Sider is spelled SIEDR, or something like that, or, that's, you can post it on Twitter and be like, hey, Fanatics, you screwed up my jersey. But realistically, like, what matters is if the jersey that Connor McDavid wears out on the ice is looking good and, looks like a nice jersey. So I think where the issue lies with it a lot is the products that the fans receive, like what you buy from the Fanatics website. I see so many pictures on Instagram, Twitter of like, numbers falling off of like actual jerseys that people spend $100+ for. It's kind of ridiculous that, first of all, I don't know what the reasoning is with the National Hockey League that, who was it before Adidas? It was Reebok, why do these jersey companies not want to renegotiate with the National Hockey League? I've heard some things that like the NHL is kind of hard to work with. I don't know that that's entirely the case, especially when you're a jersey manufacturer. I know companies like Adidas and Nike and, some of these other groups, like that's not their main hustle, like they sell shoes, they sell athletic wear, they sell their stuff. Adidas doing the hockey jerseys is just like gravy for them, right? So you get that it's not their main source of income for the company, but I definitely worry about Fanatics. It gets me riled up, man. I think they're gonna screw it up royally. That is the non-optimist in me.
I
That
feel
is
like
that is
you're
glass
right,
half
though.
empty.
Just because, like, with baseball and like how astronomically bad those jerseys are,
It's atrocious.
and it's like I don't know if you've seen like the issue with pants where
Yeah, everybody can see through them.
they're see through, they're the wrong color. Some teams are having to wear pants from 2-3 years ago to just
What are we
have a
doing?
full-
That's ridiculous.
It's outstanding. It's just so bad. I don't understand how Fanatics can do that, especially when the quality of the jerseys in the past 5 years have diminished. You know, we used to have those like embroidered patches on the sleeves of the baseball jerseys. Now those are all like heat press stickers. It's just there's so many small things that they took away that just totally threw away the quality.
And to your point, I mean, like you look at the Chicago Blackhawks logo from an Adidas jersey to a Fanatics. Like the Adidas jersey, it's everything is chain stitched. I mean, the Chicago Blackhawks logo on an Adidas jersey is probably the most gorgeous thing you'll see in hockey.
Mm-hmm.
But now with Fanatics being heat pressed, it's just kind of it's just there. And like my dad has a couple Blackhawks Fanatics jerseys. He's worn his Seabrook jersey once, and it was destroyed. Like it's
brutal.
I got him like for Christmas. I made a little bit of like a bracket where I would ask people I work with, choose this player or that player without any context of a current player and a player, like a current player on a team of a jersey he doesn't have yet, and a former player from like when he was like younger. And the winner was Yanni Hakanpää, because a lot of people like his name. So for Christmas, I got him a Yanni Hakanpää home red Carolina Hurricanes jersey.
That's absurd. You
And
bought that?
I absolutely did. I'm like, I want to get a jersey of a player that no one's ever going to know. And he played, I think, 11 regular season games for a Hurricanes playoff run.
He plays on Dallas now, though.
Yes, but no one's going to know he ever played for the Hurricanes, which is it just
Played for the Wolves, didn't he?
I believe.
I think he did.
I'm not sure. I know he played for the Ducks.
I'll look that up real quick.
But I'm like, it's a Fanatics jersey. I don't want to spend $300 on an Adidas jersey that's fully customized. So I bit the bullet and went Fanatics, and he's worn it more than twice. He's worn it, I think, 6 times, and he's being super careful with it. But the fact that we even have to have this discussion just goes to show you the quality control issues. I mean, at least the number was right. Then I checked the name like 4 times before I wrapped it in wrapping paper. I'm like, okay, it's spelled right. Okay, good. They have both the A's at the end. Okay, it's 58. All right, we're good. So, but
118 games with the Chicago Wolves, by the way, spread across 2 seasons for Yanni Hakanpää.
nice.
Not that matters, but you know, yeah, I agree with the Fanatics thing. All right. So from terrible jerseys, fraudulent jerseys, to fraudulent teams. This was the question I asked you last time that you skirted around ever so cleverly. It seems like we look at this playoffs, you know, we were talking about it's a little top heavy, a lot of teams over 100 points, you know, and a lot of these teams, I build them as Stanley Cup contenders, and I don't think I'm the only one. Like, I think Florida could win the Cup. I think Carolina could win the Cup. Same goes for Dallas, Colorado, and Winnipeg. I think they're all loaded. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if Connor McDavid brought his Edmonton Oilers to the Stanley Cup final, or if we saw a Vegas repeat, even though maybe it hasn't looked like that recently. What is the fraud team currently in the Stanley Cup playoffs? The team hiding amongst all the very good teams, as you know, and is being painted as a very good hockey team right now that maybe come playoff time is going to turn into a pumpkin.
Okay, so I didn't realize I actually skirted around this question last time. I might have just done that subconsciously. But I'll give you a definite answer here, and that is the Winnipeg Jets. All season long, it's been Dallas, Colorado, Winnipeg at the top of that division. But recently, and we saw this last year too, although it was basically since the onset of the calendar year of January of 2023, we saw this. But they've been in a pretty steep and rapid decline in terms of their play. They haven't won. I think they're winless in 6 straight now. They lost to Ottawa, I believe, their last game. I mean, Ottawa, of course, is playing really good hockey down the stretch as their annual thing. But I don't think I think the Jets are playing kind of how they did last year, where they're backing into the playoffs. Now the point separation between them and between the Avalanche and the Stars is quite enormous. I mean, 6 points is quite a bit considering those 2 teams were within 2 points pretty much since the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
And we all know what happened last year when they played Vegas. They won game 1, but after that, Vegas ran them over. And I don't see any other team in the West that really looks like a fraud. I mean, at one point we had the two wild cards were the hottest team in the league in the Predators, who have lost 2 games in a row, and the other team was Vegas. I mean, obviously they're flip flopping with the Kings right now, but I think the Kings, because they've been there in the past, they've ran into Edmonton the last 2 years. But regardless, I think the Kings are still a solid playoff team. But I just think the Winnipeg Jets might have a same problem as last year, where they just flame out, and that might be the biggest fraud in the West.
You don't think that, before you give me an Eastern fraud, you don't think the additions of Monahan I really love the additions of Monahan and Toffoli. I think that, my pause on the Jets before those moves were the secondary scoring. If Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele don't produce offense, you are not going to score. Tyler Toffoli scores a lot, man. Like, that guy puts pucks in the back of the net with relative ease at times, it seems. You don't think that makes up for it at all?
That I do believe that helps, because last year I think the only 2 additions they made were getting Nemesnikov and Niederreiter, who are great players, but they're not going to replace a Kyle Connor if he goes down with injury, or Mark Scheifele. Monahan and Toffoli are excellent additions. They've been playing both really well as well. I mean, Toffoli also, to his point, he's a playoff warrior. I mean, he's got 2 cups with the Kings. He's got tons of experience.
He's got 1 cup with the Kings. Not to jump in on your point here. I will double check.
I know.
Keep rolling.
I know he had the 2014 with the 70s line with him, Carter, and Tanner Pearson. But either way, Toffoli has a ton of playoff experience. And
1 Stanley Cup.
You got me there. Okay. Either way, Toffoli's he's been a great player for a long, long time. He can score goals at will. Not at will, but he scores goals when you need a goal. You need like someone to score an easy goal here and there. Like Phil Kessel comes to mind. Just comes down the lane, snipes the top corner. You got a goal. Playoff goals are a lot harder to come by than regular season goals. So having 2 veterans in Monahan and Toffoli are definitely going to help. I just think that sometimes 2 players aren't enough. I mean, ask the Leafs of any team in the last 5 years. I mean, bringing in these two extra players hasn't helped them yet.
Yeah.
But I guess I'll swing over to the East.
Yeah, who you got as a fraud team in the East?
This might be a little bit of a cop-out pick, but I'm going to pick Washington just because, look at their goal differential. It's a very big outlier at a -31. That might be the biggest I've seen in as far as playoffs.
Hang on, though. That is kind of a cop-out because nobody's billing them, I feel like, as Stanley Cup contenders.
That is true, but it just, and it's kind of hard to tell. Like, not hard to tell, but it's hard to quantify that as a fraud because no one's wanting to take that last spot in the Metro. I mean, you have the Rangers and you have Carolina at 104 and 101 points respectively, and then you have Washington all the way to 82. Yeah. So even if they sneak in, they might be dangerous. But let me give you a better answer here for you. Just 1 second. I'm gonna go with the team that ranks number 1 in the Atlantic Division. That's the Bruins.
Yeah.
I'll go with them instead.
That's my pick a little bit too. So let's hear it. What do you got?
They went through a stretch where they could not win an overtime period. That obviously overtime format's a lot different in the playoffs, but the Bruins just haven't looked as Bruin-like, I guess, as in years past. Obviously, there's been much talk about no Bergeron, no Krejci, and it has a factor, yes, and Marchand has to carry that load with Pastrnak. But I don't think they did enough to address. They really couldn't address given the amount of picks they don't have anymore, just because they've been so good for so long. They just don't feel like the Bruins. They don't feel scary going into the playoffs. They've obviously won enough games to be first in the Atlantic and are threatening to maybe win the President's Trophy again. But I don't know. It's just something about Bruins. It doesn't feel right to me. It's kind of like a intuition thing. It's not anything. Their stats look relatively the same. They have a plus 41 goal differential. They're 6-4 in their last 10. It's not like they're playing their way out of first place. They've already clinched a playoff spot. They've only lost 17 games in regulation, but it remains to be seen, and we'll see what happens. You never know. They could play Toronto, and they'll already have that psychological advantage. But we'll just see what happens. They still have some veterans, and they still have one of the best goalie tandems in the league.
They got the best goal. I think that's the demarcation point here for the Bruins, as opposed to some of these other teams that if you gave the Boston Bruins league average goaltending, they might look league average, right? You mentioned the loss of Bergeron and Krejci, and now you're expected to fill that with Pavel Zacha and Charlie Coyle. And those are both very fine players. I know Zacha is, I think, outproduced both Bergeron and Krejci on the season. But it's different than just points production, too. It's the first of all, if you're talking Patrice Bergeron, it's the two-way play. It's even just the name, like even just the aura that player brings around him and that he carries with him as far as just, he's going to dominate you in the face-off circle. And he's, going to be attached to your hip, and you're not really going to gain an inch with a player like Patrice Bergeron. I don't know that you're really going. I think you might be able to get a few inches in on Pavel Zacha. And, Charlie Coyle's good. He can put a few pucks in the back of the net, but you see the depth, obviously. Like you lose those guys, and your response is going out and signing guys like Morgan Geekie, right? And, James Van Riemsdyk, who maybe should have been a Bruin 4 or 5 years ago, but now it's a little bit different. And I question the defense. Obviously, you have Charlie McAvoy back there. I know Matt Grzelcyk is still there. You got Brandon Carlo as good D-man, but you're bringing up, oh gosh, what was the kid from Louisiana? What was his name?
Lowry.
Mason Lowry. He's a fine player, and I think he's still probably like a year away from really being at that level. But, you're calling up these guys. Like, I like John Beecher a lot, but if you're not going to play him, keep in mind, this is the Boston Bruins, and you put in like an 19-year-old Matt Patra in the first half of the season before he went to the World Juniors and got hurt, after coming back, and we're not going to see him again this season. But that is very un-Bruins-like, I feel like, to take a 19-year-old and, they're not the Detroit Red Wings of 10 years ago where they let guys, ripen in the minors until they're 22, 23. But even still, to call that kid up and give him as much responsibility of playing with Marchand and the likes as they did, I don't know. Long story long, the Bruins are my fraud team in both the Eastern and the Western Conference. I think they have enough fraud to them to cover both conferences. But a lot of contenders this year. I don't mean to we're not trying to bash on any of these teams. It's more of just are there really 12 Stanley Cup contenders? There might be. That's the way the Stanley Cup playoffs work, is genuinely anybody can win the Stanley Cup. There might be as many as 16. We haven't even really mentioned one of the hottest teams in the NHL, the Nashville Predators, right? Do I really think Nashville is going to win the Stanley Cup? No, probably not. But a lot of the Stanley Cup playoffs is what happened with the Florida Panthers last year. They were playing their best hockey come February. Paul Maurice flips the switch on the team, screams at them in Toronto, and from then on they lit the world on fire and made it all the way to the Stanley Cup final, where they ran out of gas against a Vegas team that probably could have played another round. But do I think Nashville can win the Stanley Cup? No. Could I see them winning a series, maybe two? Yeah, you got Ryan McDonough back there on a blue line that also has Roman Josi on it, and I could see it working out. You got UC Saros and net. The depth scoring is there. Ryan O'Reilly's fit in really well. You got Gus Nyquist being, a top line scorer for them, which is unbelievable. But, it is very interesting the way that we think about it. And I do think that there are more contenders this season than maybe other seasons. There are genuinely 12 teams that probably could win the Stanley Cup. But it's fun to nitpick here and there about teams that, because there is going to be, first of all, in the playoffs, there's probably going to be 6 to 8 I mean, after the first round, 8 teams will be gone. But, some of those are going to be teams that we look at and say, holy cow, that shouldn't have happened. Or I'm very surprised by that result, whether a team even bows out a bit quicker than we expect or something like that. So I think it's interesting that we both landed on the Bruins, though. 2 more questions here for you, and they're both loaded. So but then we'll wrap for the day. I do want to take a second for a Kill Thomas in between those 2 questions, probably. But who is your most? I know we talked about the Penguins a little bit, so maybe try and keep them out of this one. But who is your team that is going to be among the most interesting in the off season that misses the playoffs this year? Who is this a pivotal off season for?
I think the answer would be, for me, Buffalo.
It
was between Buffalo for me. For me, between Buffalo or the Flames. Just because for the Flames, you lose Hanifin, Tanev, Zadorov, Lindholm, and you bring in Kuzmenko, but there's just a bunch of wild factors with the Flames. But as far as Buffalo goes, they were expected to be in the playoffs, if not in the hunt down the stretch right until the end. they're still they're 7 points out. They can still make it, but it's looking slimmer every passing game. And they'll have one good game, one bad game. But they were really supposed to do something this year, I feel. And they made a great addition in Bowen Byram. And because Middlestead might have priced himself out of Buffalo. He'll be an RFA at the end of this season. But Buffalo might need to do some like soul searching or player trading or something, because the emergence of Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen has been great to see, and he's been playing a ton down the stretch. And will he and Levi be the tandem? What do you do with Comrie? There's just so many different factors that the reason, like, why did Buffalo miss? They're gonna have to figure that out, why they stumbled. I mean, Tage Thompson didn't have the counting stats as he did last year, but you can't.
Scored 4 goals on Friday though.
That is true. Yes, and
I know what you mean.
He has been hurt at points this year as well, but you can't pin that on one player. Victor Olofsson fell off hard this year as well. But it's been nice to see Zach Benson come into the lineup and play a relatively substantial role for being one of only a few players of this last draft to play in the NHL this year. And it'll be interesting to see his next step. They have prospects coming up as well. Lucas Rusek has played a few games in the NHL this year. You probably have one of the best young D-cores in the league with Power, Dahlin, now Byram, Matthias Samuelsson, who's been hurt all year. I feel like
kind of forgotten about a little bit too.
Yeah, he's very underrated defenseman. I mean, he blocks shots like you read about. Like, he is a pivotal part of that blue line. I think the Sabres have a lot of questions to answer. A lot of how things kind of fit in the grand puzzle of things. But that's why, to me, the Sabres are the most interesting team.
Do you think maybe they package some of these young guys? Obviously, you have like even some of the other young players you didn't mention, like Roseanne and Yuri Kulik, ripping it up for Rochester. And you have Matt Savoy over in the Western Hockey League now. You have Benson, who's been, in and out. He's played great hockey when he's been in the lineup. And you think maybe you package one, maybe two of those guys and, I don't know. It just is interesting. Like, maybe you bring in, and this is hard, because who of these players are available, right? You think of like a Noah Hannafin, but that's another left shot. But just a veteran, like a good veteran, like an Alex Tuck addition that they had. Like, that was such an impactful move, and he's such an impactful player for them. I hope they, get him locked up and stuff. And honestly, they should probably slap the C on him now that Kyle Opozo is trying to win a Stanley Cup down in Florida. But, do you think maybe that is like the move that needs to happen? Maybe, and do you think if there is something like that, do you think it needs to happen on the front end for Buffalo or on the back end? Because obviously you have the 3 stud defensemen you mentioned, but they're all lefties. Does that matter to you at all?
I think it would need to happen more on the forward side of things, because they kind of tried that this year with bringing in Eric Johnson. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's not the player he once was, but who is in their mid-30s anyway. Because that experiment really didn't work, and he's now playing for Philly. I think by bringing in a more veteran player like an Alex Tuck to complement the younger forwards coming up, because the defensemen that are younger have already established themselves as great players, and Dahlin, who is leading the charge, is already, I believe 24, 25. He's already played a bunch of NHL seasons. I think this is his 5th or his 6th. He's got that, and he's a leader on that Buffalo team. But I think they need another forward, like a veteran forward, maybe in his later 20s. And it's obviously hard to find, especially those that are the top 6 variety. But that might help their younger players, especially those that haven't even broken into the league yet, and having like players like Zach Benson and Roseanne, players that can look to that veteran for that leadership. And I don't know who would be out there off the top of my head just to look at, but
it's hard. It's easier said than done. You look around the league, and a lot of these guys are either like young studs that teams want to hang on to and aren't going to move, or maybe you look at the free agent class. Ironically enough, Sam Reinhart is a UFA and might look really good in Buffalo. And, in that case, I don't think he would actually go back to Buffalo. But, maybe if he walks away a Stanley Cup champion. But I think all signs point to him getting re-signed. Even a player like Gensel, I know, Sabres fans might have fears of Jeff Skinner 2.0 kind of situation. Not that Jeff Skinner's been a bad player in Buffalo. It's just, can you believe he's played 1,000 NHL games and hasn't played a single playoff game?
And that's crazy. I remember seeing Ron Hainsey with like 960 and then winning a cup in his first season as soon as he entered the playoffs. So
yeah,
I can't believe, yeah, with Skinner, I feel like he was just drafted in the league. I mean, it's been 14 years now, so that's crazy.
No, but I hear you. Like that, it's hard to make a move like that. And there aren't a lot of like 26, 27, 28 year olds that are, pegged for a move right now that you look at and are like, really available for trade maybe and, really able to do that. So I agree with you that Buffalo, thoughts on the goaltending tandem too. I know you said that they could be among the best in the league, and I agree with that. But I think I forget it might have been like Elliot Friedman talking about it. The age gap between the two of them isn't large, like it's only maybe 2, maybe 3 years. Both of those guys want to be starters in the National Hockey League. Is there enough net, or do you maybe, package? I don't see them moving on from Devin Levi at all. I think he's the guy that they want to play net for the Buffalo Sabres. Like, I think that's who the organization wants it to be, So do you think they maybe move somebody like UPL in a package deal? Or is it a better bet to hang on to both of them and hope that, you just get really solid goaltending from both guys next season?
I would hang on to both of them for next year. You might be able to do a situation kind of how Boston is going with Olmark and Swayman, where it's a 1A, 1B. And if the relationship is there like it is with Swayman and Olmark, then I don't see a reason why not. Just keep them both just to see what you have, because Levi is still developing. I mean, he started the season. He played a lot of games. He didn't exactly do well in those games, and they got sent to the minors. He's been playing in Rochester ever since, and he has been called up here and there. But UPL has been the workhorse for Buffalo ever since the calendar changed to 2024. So I think at least starting the year with those two goaltenders, and if push comes to shove, one of them, I think, yeah, I do agree with you that Levi is the goalie of the future, because UPL is 25, but Levi isn't far behind. If you want to package one of those goalies, I do think you do UPL.
Yeah.
Especially you'd be selling quite high on him at this point. So if they were to trade him this offseason or during the season or next offseason, he might be the player to go, especially because now he's just entering his prime. Goalies do last a little bit longer in their primes, assuming they stay healthy. So he might be the one to go, but we got to see how. I think the first 10, they tried it this year with the first 10 games with Levi, but I think they
were really forcing it there for a little bit at the beginning.
Yeah, it seemed like they really wanted to make it work. I think another offseason of development for Levi, have him take. I think there was just so much pressure on him that probably didn't help Levi's development either.
Yeah.
Because there's no goalies besides like Ken Dryden have stepped into the league as a rookie and just
he wants to be the guy too. Like you can tell. There's not a lot. You don't get to that level without some sort of level of ego. Almost, I almost don't want to call it that, but like he's hungry for it. Like he wants to be that guy in the net for that team, right?
Yeah, I like the hunger. I like the drive. He displays all the characteristics for just being a good professional hockey goaltender. He's got the mindset. Now I think he just needs a team in front of them to help him a little bit, because the Sabres don't have the best defensive schemes in the league, as their -4 goal differential shows currently. But I think at least this offseason is going to be crucial for Buffalo, especially in the goaltending aspect.
All right, so we will pencil that for the Swords this summer as being an interesting team. I've been working hard trying to get somebody from the local market to come on and talk some more Buffalo Sabres with us about what's really going on there. So I have one last question for you, but before we get there, I just want to mention Akil Thomas. Really happy for this guy. Like this is a 24-year-old that hasn't really gotten a shake at all in the National Hockey League yet. You see a lot of players get opportunities at 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. And this guy has gone, I know injuries have plagued him a bit the last couple of seasons. But, this is a guy who's consistently been considered by his peers, too, to be a very good hockey player. Considered by Hockey Canada, he was on a World Junior team, scored the gold medal goal for the gold medal clinching goal for Canada, the 2020 World Juniors here, and it was his only goal of the tournament. It was a very, very memorable one, and this guy's a player, man. He's got 43 points in 61 games, same amount of points in Shane Wright, even though he's played 5 more games, but that's a good level of production. I know he's a bit older, wears an A down for the Ontario Reign. I just... Maybe this isn't so much a question as just like, he could make his debut tonight. They take on the Jets, right? I think that this is a great move. I think this kid really deserves it. Anybody that gets a call up that you look at him and are like, oh, this guy's been knocking at the door for a while now. I have all the time in the world for. Do you maybe have a thought on Akil Thomas?
Yeah, I'm excited to see him play. I'm always excited to see new players come in and step in and see how they are. We saw the hat trick he scored in the preseason.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll make the team. And unfortunately, he's making his debut on potentially April 1st. But I mean, who knows? He could potentially be an important piece for that playoff run because no one has a book on this player yet in the NHL level. So he could be a wild card for the Kings if he sticks in the lineup going into the playoffs. So I'm excited to see where he slots into the lineup, whether he'll play top 6 or bottom 6 or where he slides in.
I would assume honestly it's 4C. Like I don't know that there's a whole lot of room in the Kings lineup. I think that was the same problem for Alex Turcotte, who obviously goes on LTIR in a corresponding move to them calling up a kill. But you have Kopitar, Deneau, whoever else in your third, in Dubois, I guess, if you peg him there. But I don't know that he's going to have too much of a crazy opportunity unless he lights the world on fire a little bit here, maybe. But yeah, no, we'll see how it goes. I love new players coming up to the NHL as well, especially guys that have been earning it. We mentioned the Kings and the Jets. That goes down at 9 p.m. Eastern. Don't know why it's giving me Eastern times. Normally we get Central times on here when I'm on the NHL website. A few other games tonight. We won't run through them all, but Penguins Rangers should be a good one. Islanders Flyers, we talked about earlier, could be an important one for the standings, and so could the Detroit Red Wings and the Tampa Bay Lightning. We also mentioned briefly the Toronto Maple Leafs can clinch tonight as they host the Florida Panthers. And their new 60-goal man, Austin Matthews, Connor McDavid, and the Edmonton Oilers will visit St. Louis to take on the Blues. And maybe I have one more extra one before, because my last question is about the local team here. It's about the Hawks, but we'd be remiss maybe if we didn't talk about Connor McDavid even here for a second. One, do you think that he comes back? I mean, it didn't look like, first of all, it looked like the Oilers might not make the playoffs there for a little while. Obviously, they've, ripped off a bunch of wins, and, Chris Knobloch has been excellent behind the bench. Do you think Connor McDavid overtakes Nikita Kucherov for the Art Ross Trophy?
There's definitely potential. I think he does. He's like on a 7-game multi-point point streak.
That's unreal,
and it's insane. Like he's putting up. I mean, he's really close to. I think he's at 95 assists now. That's something I've never seen in my lifetime. Someone score 100 assists in a season, he'll join just a few players. I think Gretzky or Lemieux are the only other 3 to ever do that. So that would be historic. I think he's only. He is a few points behind yet, and Kucherov is still putting up points, of course.
Yeah.
But I think if he catches Kucherov, he might be the Hart leader. But as far just because of he was, I think, lower 80s in scoring in November, and he just flipped a switch. I wouldn't say flip a switch, but the whole team started playing better, and he's been on an absolute torrid pace ever since November. And I think because of that, he might be a leading contender for the Hart Trophy, but we'll see.
All right, just a last one here. We're a Chicago-based show. We're right by Wrigley Field. We talked about the Winter Classic a little bit. We'll all be in attendance for that there on January 1st. But the success of the Hawks almost hinges on the success of business here for the things we do, and the excitement about hockey in the city. It's important, and you can tell that there's a newfound excitement. Connor Bedard seems to have the Calder Trophy all but wrapped up at this point. I don't think there's any chance that Brock Faber's catching him. But just, we've I've talked with you about the Hawks a little bit and the young defensive prospects that they have, the Del Mastros, the Isaac Phillips, all these different guys that, have been either up and down or just down with the Rockford Ice Hogs for a majority of the season. Just thoughts on the Hawks, as the season kind of wraps up here and they look to a big summer, and a big draft pick. I know a lot of Hawks fans would like it to be Macklin Celebrini, but there's a very good chance it lands anywhere within the top 5, really. And, in a draft that I think is just very loaded, especially in the top 10, I think this is a very excellent draft. Long-winded way of saying, just a couple words on the Hawks.
It's going to be interesting to see what their offseason looks like. We'll see what kind of pick they get. I mean, any pick in the top 10 is going to be a great pick, a great option to have on your team. So we'll see and how that player works with Bedard if they jump in right next season. We'll see. But with the they're playing a lot better down the stretch. They've won more games than they've lost recently. It's been interesting to see how Landon Slaggert has come in from
Good
Notre
player.
Dame. Yeah, he's a good player. I like him. And the Hawks are getting healthy, so it's nice to see them actually get some wins and points. But I like to see the compete level of players. I mean, the Hawks have been eliminated from the playoffs for quite a while now, so I've liked seeing the compete from those players, the Kurashevs, especially Nick Foligno. I think he's been a very underappreciated part of this team just because of his age, and he's just kind of a veteran. But he has been integral to Connor Bedard and Kevin Korchinski in their development because they look to him as a leader. They look to him. I mean, he's almost old enough to be their father, and well, not quite, but you know what I mean. But
No, I do.
He's more like an older brother or an uncle to them. But he's been important. Like we saw that clip on Instagram where he was having that great battle with Korchinski and how they're giving stick taps to him after. He's been great for the development off the ice for those two players, and the more veterans that the Hawks can bring in, maybe in cheap one-year deals. I mean, Foligno signed, Dickinson signed, Mrazek, they're all signed for the next year. So the Hawks do have a big offseason, not as big as the Sabres, I believe, but tearing it down is the easy part, building it up is the hard part, and now it's about putting those puzzle pieces together, and I feel like the Hawks are on the right path.
It will be an interesting offseason for them indeed. Just a few more things I wanted to run through here. Caden Gooley was suspended 1 game for slashing Travis Konechny from the bench. That was a very interesting scene. You don't really get that very often. We were talking about the draft a second ago. Tidja Ginla is one of my draft risers. You know, a lot of people have him pegged outside the top 10. A lot of people didn't even really have him going in the first round before the season began. And then he put up a hat trick against the Wenatchee Wild in the opening game of the Western Hockey League playoffs. He is a good player. I would be afraid to not take him, especially if I were the Calgary Flames in the first round, who look like they might have a top 10 pick there. Josh Doan extends his point streak to 3 games. He has been excellent. Speaking of the sons of former NHL stars that you and I grew up enjoying a lot. Freddie Anderson, 7-0 since his return to the lineup from blood clots. His numbers have been tremendous as well. Ilya Samsonov has been very good too. And while we're sticking with the goaltending and the Russian goaltending, did you see Bednar pulling Georgiev after he got a 2-minute minor unsportsmanlike? That was a good one there. And just we were talking about this off air too, but that Olen Zellweger rip, like, I don't know. Like, look, my thought about shooting in the NHL is every puck needs to be shot as violently and as hard as possible. You know, you see guys like flub some shots, and obviously, you know, sometimes you get a muffin unexpectedly, and that's fine. You know, but some guys have tap-ins, and they will do just that. They will try and tap it in. This is the National Hockey League. If you have an open net, bear down and bury it. Like, there is absolutely no, because you'll get robbed. Like, there will be instances, we see it just about every night, where a guy doesn't put every ounce of effort he has behind a shot because he thinks he has an easy goal, and he gets stopped. Or he missed the net, something. You know, he chokes up on his stick too much, grips the stick a little too tight. But Olen Zellweger did not do that. He absolutely ripped that puck, probably one of the hardest rips for a first NHL goal that I have seen in a while. And one other note here too, the guys from the Late Game movie gave us free tickets for that premiere thing that they did, the watch party that they did. Raven did not end up coming with me, but I did end up going. It was good, man. Those guys were very nice. A lot of the movie cast were there. Nothing but gracious to me. You know, the theater wasn't, you know, super packed, but it was very nice. Like, I got to chat with a few of the people there. You know, they were very appreciative of anybody that came out. A lot of Wolves season ticket holders, but you know how it goes. You know, I was talking to RA there for a second. You know, nobody was really, you know, chatting him up there. So it was nice to just like chat him up there for a few minutes, talk to him about things, you know, and yeah. So I thank those guys for giving me the free tickets because that was definitely incentive to go check out their movie. And it's good. It's good. Anybody that's played beer league can relate to the idea. I didn't realize, you know, it was called The Late Game, and I didn't realize that it was like the idea, the premise of the movie was, I mean, you should go check it out. I'm not going to spoil the thing, but like it centers around the idea of like an 11 p.m. start beer league game, and that's the whole movie. And it's very funny. Like they certain hockey nuances, certain things. It's a bit of a hockey movie, you know. Like they're a bit crude, and you know, it's like probably for our demographic, you know. So, but it was good. It's going to appeal to a lot of people. So they just shot me a message saying thanks for coming and thank you for the tickets, Late Game Movie Guys. Go check out On the Gravel if you haven't already. It is up on YouTube. It is up on Spotify. By the time you are listening to this, it is already up. Go check that out. No race this week, right, Raven?
There's a race on Sunday.
No, I meant this past week.
That's correct.
Yeah. But, you know, you guys will have a race to cover this week. So check that out. Go watch it on YouTube. Go leave 5 stars. Leave, you know, do all those fun things, you know, all the housekeeping stuff we have to do at the end. Like, subscribe, you know, leave comments, leave ratings, whatever it is. Put a thumbs up on their YouTube video. It helps a lot. And, yeah, we appreciate everybody for tuning in today. We appreciate Nathan Scheibe for stopping by. Thank you for doing that. And we will look to have you back again soon.
Awesome. Thank you for having me here. It was a pleasure to be in person this time.
See everybody in 24 hours.